Today in episode 27 of the Play Guitar Podcast, I get into funk guitar chords. I start with the basic chords and then show you how to make small changes to get big results. Also, I've got some listener feedback, so stay tuned. Welcome to episode 27 of the Play Guitar Podcast. I'm Lee, and this is the podcast that's determined to make you a better guitar player. No matter if you're just starting out or you've been playing for years, this is the show that'll help you become the guitarist that you always wanted to be. On today's episode, it's all about funk chords. I've been asked multiple times to go over funk guitar playing, and I'm happy to say that today is the day. It's not an easy topic to just tackle in one episode. You know, it's a marriage of some very cool chords and some very cool rhythms. It sounds so easy, and once you get a few things down, it is. But to really understand what's going on, you have to spend some time with the chords and then spend some time working on funk rhythms. Today we work on the chords, and this is a lot of fun for me. I started out, I always wanted to be a lead guitar player. It's just what I wanted to do. But when I started playing a good bit of funk, I fell in love with rhythm guitar. It's so fun. And because you don't always have a lot of fast chord changes, it gives you a lot of time to think and try out different ideas. Plus, playing songs that people like to move to is so great. It just takes the communication between the performers and the audience up to the next level. So today, I'm going to do an overview of the most common and some specialty chords, but the ones that you'll find while you're playing funk guitar. And I can't wait to get started. But before we get there, I want to remind you about my free video lesson. It's called Get Your Blues Soloing Under Control. It's the 6 steps I found that will give you the right foundations for playing killer blues solos in no time at all. It's a lesson I put together for you guys after spending some time with you, and I know can really help take your soloing in a new direction. The easy way to find it is just go to www.freeblueslesson.com. When you sign up for this, you also get news about all my podcasts and videos and cool stuff, and it all gets sent right to your inbox. So go ahead and check that out at freeblueslesson.com. So thanks again for joining me today, and let's go ahead and get started with some funk chords. Funky chords, funk. I'm going to talk about funk for a bit. How do you talk about it? You're not supposed to talk about funk. You're just supposed to play it. But what is it? How do you describe it? What is funky? That's a tough thing to put into words. But you know it when you hear it, when you feel it. And as a guitar player, you really know it when you hear other guitarists play it. You say, ooh, listen to that. Now that is funky. How in the world do you play that? And I'm not just talking about, clicking on a wah-wah pedal and making a bunch of noise. I'm talking about really funky playing, harmonically interesting, otherworldly sounding chords that are played in almost a shocking rhythm that makes you just want to get up and move. Whether it's James Brown or the Meters, Parliament, Sly and the Family Stone, the Gap Band, Ohio Players, Commodores, Chic, Prince, Rick James, or like funk rock like the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Lenny Kravitz, or even Fishbone. Remember Fishbone? They all have something very cool going on with the guitar. It's this distinct guitar sound that binds all of those together. And it may be difficult to put your finger on the exact definition of what funk is itself, but it's not impossible to figure out what funk guitar is. There are very distinct things that are going on with the guitar set in all of those different instances. So what I'd like to start to take on today is the inner workings of funk guitar. What's being played? How is it being played? What rhythms are being played? We can definitely learn these things. And then we can combine all the parts together. But will that make you funky? I don't know. It will definitely help you play funkier. But to be truly funky, well, that's a whole different ball game. You got things like you got to get your wardrobe together and your mindset. All those things come into play. And that's way beyond the scope of this show. But we just want to play some funk guitar. And today I'm going to focus on the most important part of funk guitar. That's the chords. That's definitely the place to start. In later episodes, we'll tackle funk rhythms and then the tones that you should use and other things like that. But today, let's focus on the chords, funk chords. So I started off playing a few funk songs early on in cover bands, like most of us do. The first cover band I played in had a full horn line, but it played a lot more like functions than it did like bars and clubs and those things. That band did a wide range of music, and I liked the fact that it did that because it kept me on my toes. I'd have to switch from one style to another and over again. It was fun, but we would do a few, I'd say, semi-funky dance songs, and I tried my best. But the chords that I played, they never quite sounded the same as the records. We had charts, we had music, and I played the chords that were written on the charts, but they never sounded quite right. A few years later, I was in another cover band, and this band was very different. We played clubs and we played a lot, and the crowds that we played for, they were very demanding. They knew what they wanted to hear, and you had better play it. It was very strange, actually, because we would play hard rock music early on in the night. We played like Alice in Chains and Rage Against the Machine, Van Halen, all those kind of things. And then at some magical point during the evening, everything changed. And you had to keep your eye, you had to watch for it. Because at some point, all these people wanted to do, they just wanted to dance. And don't you dare play any of that heavy stuff that everybody was liking, 20 minutes ago. It was time to move. And so we played a lot of funk music, a lot. But it was great for me to really get to spend some time learning exactly what was going on in all these guitar parts, how the rhythms moved the song forward, and what was actually happening with the chord voicings that, I missed in my old band. It was a lot of fun. And I really learned a lot from having to do that, having that pressure. What I learned is there are lots of different ways to play dominant seventh chords. And thanks to learning some jazz guitar, I knew that there are lots of things that you can do to make seventh chords more interesting. The dominant seventh sound is all over funk music. Sometimes you could just be playing over one seventh chord for the majority of the song. When you do get a funk song that has some chord changes, chances are that the hook of the song is at least over a dominant seventh chord. It's a huge part of playing funk music is the dominant seventh sound. But is that all you need to know? No, of course not. You'll find other chords in as well. You'll find minor sevenths and the derivatives of the minor sevenths. They use a lot as well. And among some other chords that I'm going to go over later on. But the seventh chord is king. It's definitely king in funk, the dominant seventh chord. So let's go ahead and see some common funk chords, starting from the most basic, and then we'll work our way through to some other more interesting sounds. Okay, dominant seventh chords. We have to know a bit about these chords to play funk. You get it, right? I've said it a few times. So if you aren't familiar with building chords, go on back to, there's a blog post I have. It's at www.playguitarpodcast.com/chords. And this is my blog post that shows the techniques used to how to build chords from scratch. It's really important to know. The dominant seventh chords come from the first, the third, the fifth, and the flat seventh of the scale. Yes, not the seventh, the flat seventh, a lowered seventh. So in the key of C, a C7 chord, which is the short way of describing a dominant seventh chord, you'll just see C7. That's just the standard of how it is. It can get confusing, but C7 means a dominant seven with a flat seven. Those notes would be C for the first, E for the third, G for the fifth, and B flat for the seventh. Not a B, which is in the C major scale, but a B flat. The lowering of this one note gives the dominant seventh its distinctive sound. It makes the chord sound a little uneasy and a little bit tense. It feels like it wants to go somewhere. It wants to resolve somewhere else. Before blues and funk, the dominant chords were kind of resigned to be used as a setup to go back to the one chord. But in more modern times, the tension of using this dominant chord without resolving it, or even using it as the one chord in the whole song, it sounded pretty cool to us. That tension that it gives speaks to listeners of these more modern generations. And on the songs where the seventh chord lasts for most of the songs, that tension can really build. It's a very distinctive sound, but we've gotten used to it over time. But at one time, I'm sure it was pretty shocking. There are lots of ways to play a seventh chord. There's the standard bar chord way, but you might find that that's not always the best voicing for a funk song. Seventh chords can sound drastically different depending on the voicing used. Like here's that bar chord. This is at the 8th fret. It's the one that looks like an E7, the open E7. But here's a C7 back down in open position. And back to the bar chord. Here's a C7 that looks like an A7 slid up to the 3rd fret. And then another one in that same area, but with the pinky on the high E string on the 6th fret. All of those have a completely different sound. Those are all C7th chords. How about that? So try finding as many different ways of playing 7th chords that you can. I'm sure that you'll hear some familiar sounds as you go through them. So that's the basic chord for funk, the 7th chords. But then we have something called a 9th chord. 9th chords sound very difficult. Ooh, 9th chords. But they're not. They're just dominant 7th chords with one added note, the 9th. So, okay, I may have lost you, but how do you find out what note is the 9th? Okay, so, let's build our 7th chord again. So, if we do in the key of C, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, we give each a number. C is the first. C is number 1. Then we skip a note to get E, which is the 3rd. We skip another note to go to the 5th, which is a G. And then we skip another one to go to the 7th, and we flat that one because it's dominant. So that'd be B flat. So we have C, E, G, B flat. You notice we're just skipping notes. Well, let's skip one more. Let's skip over the 8th, which is just the octave of C. It's just C again. And where does that put us? Where do we go now? We skip to the 9th, which is the next note past that second C. Well, that next note is a D. And D is also the second note of the scale. But when we're building chords, we kind of continue numbering our skipped notes in order. 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, and so on and so on. So that way we would call the D note in the key of C, we could call it the 2nd or the 9th. And that's where we're going. It's the same note. So a 9th chord is just a dominant 7th chord with an added note, the 9th from the scale. In this instance, it would be C, E, G, B flat, and D. Here's a little different there with that ninth. Okay. So let me play a ninth chord for you. Sound familiar? Instant James Brown sound. The ninth is used in most of James Brown's biggest songs. It functions exactly the same as the dominant seventh. You can use them interchangeably, but it's got a little extra something. It's got a little extra spice thrown in, that D note, the ninth. So we can change one note in this chord to get another one of the most recognizable guitar chords. If you take the ninth, in this case, the D, and raise it by one note, you get a chord called C7 sharp 9. Let's take a listen to that. So here's the 9, and then we're going to take this D and raise it one note, one half step, excuse me. Sound familiar? The Jimi Hendrix chord. It's very funky, and it's used in a lot of funk songs. So I'm going to play a background track, and I'm going to go ahead and play some of these seventh, ninths, and sharp nines. Okay, so this is a funk song and background track in C7. So I'm just going to play some C7 chords over top of it. That's the open position. A whole bunch of different voicings of C7. They all have a little bit different sound to them, even though they function the same. Okay, so the next one we talked about was the ninth chord, so we added that D to the C. And here's what it sounded like. All right, James Brown. Ninth sound. You've all heard that sound before. Okay, so the after that we talked about the 7 sharp 9, where we raise that D one half step. Kind of Jimi Hendrix sound, right? So that's the basics. That's kind of the bread and butter there. But what if we wanted to go a little bit farther? How about 13th chords? Okay, now we're getting out there. 13th chords. What in the world is that? I'm sure I can't play 13th chords. Wrong. You can. Let's go back to our chord builder. If we continue skipping notes, we would get this. 1, 3, 5, flat 7, 9, 11, 13. That's the order that they go. So let's try that with C. Okay, C is 1, E is 3, G is 5, B flat is the flat 7, D is the 9, F is the 11th, and then A is the 13th. So to get to that 13th, we'd have a lot of notes. C, E, G, B flat, D, F, and A. We're going to have to leave some of those notes out. We don't have quite enough strings to play them all. So you generally will see that the 11th will be left out and the 5th will be left out a lot. when you're playing 13th chord. So you definitely need to have the third, and the flat 7th. That tells you it's a dominant chord in there. And then that 13th in there in some respect to get, a 13th chord. And here's the sound of a 13th chord. Pretty neat, huh? Let me put that background track on again and let's see what that sounds like over that. Now this 13th chord I'm going to use, this is over that James Brown C9 chord. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my pinky on the high string up 2 frets to the A. There's another one up here at the 8th fret. Okay, that's the sound of the 13th. It's just taking that 7th chord and adding some new notes to it to give it a different color. So those are the main extensions of the dominant 7th chord that you'll see in funk songs. So try to build these chords in other areas of the neck to get really cool and different voicings. But to move on from the dominant sound, let's take a look at something else. Let's take a look at minor chords in funk. Yes, they have minor chords as well. The first we'll start off with is the minor 7th chord. If you've ever heard the song Long Train Runnin' by the Doobie Brothers, you will hear a very funky version of the first minor chord. I'm going to talk about the minor 7th chord. And this chord is built just like the dominant 7th chord, but with one little difference. And that is that the third note is lowered by 1/2 step. It's flat. The third note is the note that makes it minor. So we have to have that flat. So we will have C as the first note, E flat as the third, G as the 5th, and B flat as the 7th. Very cool sound. There are many voicings of the minor 7th, and one of my favorites is just barring straight across the high 4 strings at the same fret as the root. And we're in C here, so that would be at the 8th fret. Super simple. And in a funk song with a minor key, this is really hard to beat. So let's try that out. I think I got a minor one here. There's that minor 7th at the 8th fret. It's just my first finger straight across. Very neat. Okay. The next way that we can kind of fancy that up a little bit is we're going to use something called a minor 9th chord now. Now we just follow the same procedure as we did with the regular 9th chords. We in this instance will have a C for the first, an E flat since it's minor for the third, flat third, G for the 5th, B flat for the flat 7th, and then D for the 9th. So it's a C minor 7th chord with a D thrown in. It's pretty nice. Very nice. Or those are the main ones that you hear. So let's hear what that sounds like. minor ninth. Okay, so the last of the minor funk chords that I'm going to talk about is the minor 11th chord. Okay, and that if you were to go through the list again, it would be C would be the first, E flat would be the flat third, G would be the fifth, B flat would be the flat seventh, D's the ninth, and then F would be the 11th. We're adding an F to that minor ninth chord. One more. The problem is we're running out of strings. We can't do that. So we're going to have to leave some notes out. We're going to leave out the fifth and the ninth. So I love this voicing. It's the root, flat third, flat seventh, and the 11th. It sounds like this. Very nice. Let's hear that over the track. Pretty neat. I really like that one. And let's see the way that is spelled out. I'll give you that the way that's fretted. We've got on the low E string, 8th fret, on the D string, 8th fret, on the G string, 8th fret, and then on the B string, the 6th fret. We don't play the A string or the high E string. Very neat. Very neat sound. I use that a lot. Okay, so those are the meat and potatoes funk chords, the basics. They're different voicings to all of these chords, and they're all over the neck. And they all have their own special quality. And going through all of them is way beyond what we have time for here. I'm thinking of making a chord construction video course that will really open up your chord playing over the fretboard. That would go into finding the different voicings of all these different chords. But this is not everything that you can do with funk guitar. There's more. You bet there's more. Enter dominant suspended fourth chords. The 7 sus4 chord is super interesting. If you've ever played a plain sus4 chord, like this, the sus4 chord, the 7 sus4 chord works the exact same way. It's basically the suspended fourth, the sus4 replaces the major third with a note that's 1 half step or 1 fret above. So here's the 7th, and then we take the third note, raise it up 1. Then you can go back to the regular 7th. Back to sus4. Has a very interesting sound. It's sort of like a 7th chord with an airy quality, and it kind of wants to resolve back to that regular chord. So let's take a listen to that. Here where I resolved it back to the dominant 7th chord. Prince loved 7 sus4 chords, and he used them a whole lot. And they're great to use if you have one chord that just plays for a very long time, where it would be very boring if you just played C7 for like 16 bars or something like that. What you could do is you could go back and forth between C7 and then the C7 sus4. It adds some interesting movement in the chords without changing the overall sound of the dominant chord. It's not easy to explain, but you heard it in the example right back there. But 7 sus4 chords are very fun. Okay, in episode 26 last week, I also talked about double stops or dyads. you'll find a whole lot of double stops played in funk music. Here's one I like to play a lot. It's on the high string. It's the minor third. This is on the 11th fret. This is in the key of C still. 11th fret on the high E string. And then the 10th fret on the B string. Just those two notes together. It's a minor third on the top and a 13th on the B string. And then we can go back to barring at the 8th fret for where the top of the C7th chord is. That's a pretty neat one. I like that, and I'll play it for you in a second. But you can also take double stops from the chord notes and use them in funk too. They cut through the mix so well, you can use them right from the basic chords. So let me demonstrate those. Here's the ones on the high strings. And here's some from the chords. Pretty neat. Some double stops on there. They sound really nice for funk. Also, the last thing I want to talk about is something called half step slides. And I've played this a few times tonight. If you know that you're supposed to play a certain chord at a certain time, sometimes it can sound cool to displace that chord by a fret for a short time, just to build a little bit of tension. And then you can resolve it back to the fret it was supposed to be played on. For example, if I was, supposed to play a C7 chord, I could play a B7 chord for a few seconds before I hit the C. So let's take a listen to that. Here's the B7. Sounds better when it's quicker. If you hold on to it too long, it sounds a little too just out. But if you do it really quick. Sounds pretty nice. Okay, well, there you have it. My whirlwind tour of the basic funk course that you can use to liven up those funk songs that you might be playing. We went over 7th chords, 9th chords, 7♯9 chords, 13th chords, minor 7th chords, minor 9th chords, minor 11th chords, 7 sus4 chords, dyads, and half step slides. That's a bunch. The next time you've got your guitar, try to give some of these a try. At least try adding the 9th and the 13th to your basic 7th chord and see what you get. It may be a new sound that you can incorporate in your songs, songs you're already playing, or maybe some new jams down the road. So what do you think? With a little patience, you can extend the 7th and minor 7th chords to all sorts of funk goodness. Have you ever played some of these chords? And what songs did you use them on? We would all love to know. So just leave a comment in the show notes over at www.playguitarpodcast.com/027. This is listener feedback. This is where if you've got a comment or question I can help you with, I will try my best to help you. To get in touch with me, you can always email at feedback@playguitarpodcast.com. You can use the comments on the show notes page. You can use my contact form. You can get in touch with me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all that stuff. But right now, we're going to talk about email. I got a few emails this week. One was from Joey P. He listens on Spotify. He wants to catch up with some players that he's been jamming with. And Joey, thank you so much for the email. I've got a lot of stuff coming out, but I've got a lot of stuff I've already put out that could be really helpful. So a lot of people just listen to the podcast, but I've got some great blog posts that a lot of them kind of go along with the podcast in order. So my suggestion would be take some time and check out the blog posts over at the website, as well as some of the earlier podcast episodes, and start putting some of the things I've said into practice. Most of what I put out there is foundational stuff, the stuff that a lot of people miss. And once you can get those things together, you won't believe how fast things start really going for you. So thanks, Joey, for the message. I hope I helped. Also, I talked to Jason A. Didn't talk to him. We emailed. He was the one that asked about, for you on the Facebook group, he asked about the chord progression that goes C, A7, D7 to G7. He was wondering about ideas for playing over that. He was thinking about walking some lines or targeting some chord tones. And I thought this would be great for the Facebook group to take a look at. So what I did is I made a little background track with all those chords that just looped over and over again. And I put it up on the Facebook group to see who was up for trying it out. And later on in the week, I'm going to put my own thoughts up on this one as well, but I want to see what happens. There's been some cool stuff up there already for it. We've also been sharing a lot of cool videos and some news from the NAMM show, some new products that are out there. And last week we also had a featured Friday, which was Jeff Beck. We talked a lot about Jeff Beck. We shared some stuff, and Chris put up a great video. He was playing "'Cause We Ended as Lovers," one of my favorite songs, and it's been a lot of fun. I'm loving the group. I wish I had more time to get in there, but that's going to happen this week. But I've been trying also to come up with a name for the listeners. Kind of like how the listeners, there's a guy named John Lee Dumas. He has a show called Entrepreneur on Fire, and he calls his listeners are Fire Nation. So that's what he calls them. Anyway, but if you guys have an idea of a name for the listeners of the show, I'd appreciate it. Just get in touch with me. Let me know. Speaking of the Facebook group, I'd like to welcome this week's new members. So welcome Richard S., Greasy K, John B., Sengoku T, Imache E, Kellen Q, Boudica J, Ken W, Muhammad M, Muhammad R, Prishka G, Al W, Orlando O, Grant G, and Tori A. All right, thank you guys. Anyway, the group is going really great, and I encourage you all to join. Just go over to www.playguitargroup.com, type that in, and it will take you straight to the Facebook group where you can sign up. And last, also on a personal note, today has been a very good, but it's been a very tough one for me. There's been a decision that I've had to make. I've been mulling this over for a while, and today was the day, July 3rd, that I finally made my decision. So I found that it's very tough to try to excel at two different things at the same time. So today I made my decision. I've discontinued my in-person group guitar lessons so I can focus completely on online teaching. And I'm very excited about this. And I've got so many things planned. And it's been, up to this point, it's been slow going because of all my limited time. So I had to make a decision. And I'm so grateful for all of my students, my in-person students. And I hope that they continue with me on my new endeavor online. So anyway, it's been a little bittersweet today, but a very exciting day today. Well, that's a wrap. Thank you for joining me today for the Play Guitar Podcast. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to the show in iTunes or your podcast player. Also, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave me an iTunes review for the show. If you're interested in online lessons, go on over to playguitaracademy.com and join my early adopter list to get news on the opening of the site and an early adopter discount. Also, follow me on all of my different social media pages. Links to them are at playguitarpodcast.com. Thanks again, and I'll see you on the next episode.